How to Survive Until You're Published, Season 1, Episode 9, Building a Powerful Protagonist. Hello and welcome to How to Survive Until You're Published, the podcast. Because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
So this week, we're going to guide you through creating a character using Lisa Cron's Story Genius and Jessica Brody's Save the Cat Writes a Novel and the Emotional Wound Thesaurus. In last week's episode, we kind of already talked about general character creation and where to get started, and we touched a little bit on some of the principles that we found in these books and the ideas that they go over when you're digging into a character. But since it's so important and it's at the heart of what makes a compelling character, we really wanted to spend more time on it. So Amy, when we're really diving into creating a compelling character, what's the first thing that's crucial to know? Or what are some of the things that are crucial to know?
Yeah. So we kind of built a bit of a sketch for you in response to this question so that you can have kind of a good outline. So we're going to go through it, but I'm just going to give you the overview right now. So to build a heart-rending and life-changing hero, you'll first need a wound. The wound would cause a fear, which is the next thing that you need. After that, the fear would then cause a misbelief. And then from there, when your story gets started, you need to give your character a goal. But in order for them to feel whole and complete by the end of the story, they will need to fulfill their need, which is different from their goal.
I mean, technically it can be the same, but more often than not, if you want it to be compelling, it should be different.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the story comes in, right? It's the character in conflict with this goal and this need as they try to fulfill them.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's dive in. We're going to, what we'll do too after we finish this is we're going to build our own character. We came up with a fake character. Well, all characters are fake. But we came up with someone that we're going to use and sketch out with you while we do this so that you can see kind of how.
And when we say we came up with someone, we only have a name right now. That way you can kind of see how, one, difficult it can be and also kind of how easy it can be as they flow together. And just to kind of preface this, the order that we gave this in is how it made most sense in our head, because one thing just kind of flows to the next when you're figuring things out. But you in no way need to stick to this. You don't need to figure out their wound first or their misbelief and their fear first if that's not what works for you. But it did just make the most logical sense to us as we get into it.
Yeah, you honestly, whatever you have or whatever you come up with first, just go fill in the blanks. That's what would work. So, okay, so we're gonna start off talking about a wound. So a wound is in Save the Cat. She talks about it like a shard of glass. It's something that has gotten into your character and kind of festers and sits and haunts your character, essentially. How Lisa Cron kind of defines it as, she defines it more as like an event. Something that happened in your character's past that totally changed their worldview and changed all the things that how they experience the world from there on. One thing that she talks about, she calls it the origin scene. And she has a few questions that you can ask yourself. I highly encourage you sitting down and writing this origin scene because it helps you kind of understand where your character is coming from and everything that's going on with them. So here are some questions you can ask when writing this scene. This is in Lisa Cron's Story Genius. She says, what do they believe in going in? What do they go into the scene believing? Why do they believe it? What is their goal in the scene? And what do they expect will happen in the scene? So the idea is that they have an expectation of how the scene is going to unfold, but their expectation gets completely shattered. So from there, we move into the fear.
Yeah, just to clarify though, like it's just the cause for their flaws and the way they act the way they do is typically how like you can dumb it down a little bit too.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, it's just what brings them to those things. So that would cause a fear. And so if we look into with the Emotional Wound Thesaurus, a fear comes from the wound. It emerges based on the wound. It's the character's actions. What happens is the character's actions and choices shift to prevent the situations where this might come to pass. So they are so afraid of it, they unconsciously change what they do so that this thing won't happen. So you can think of it like a flow chart. The wound comes, and naturally from that, the fear comes, and then naturally from that comes the misbelief, which is what we'll talk about next.
Yeah, which, like, a misbelief could also be, I think, in the Emotional Thesaurus, it defines it as almost like emotional shielding. So this is kind of where their flaws come in, right? They are afraid. So, like, say they saw someone die. I'm going to kind of steal from our example, right? Then their fear might be that people get close to me, they die. Or something like that, right? So then they don't let people get close to them because they have this misbelief that if they do get close to them, then people just die, even if it doesn't make sense. But you can kind of think about the things in your life that you might be fearful of without even, like, subconsciously fearful of. This is where the writer has to become the psychologist.
It's true.
How you would start acting to these things. But this misbelief usually manifests as flaws as well in how the character acts.
Yeah. And this is what causes most of the problems with the story. So all of this happens before we jump into the story. And so understanding exactly where your character is coming before page 1 is crucial, because once you start that story and they embark on this journey of where they're going to change, you know what they're changing from. You know what they have to power through and get through in order to move on.
Different things in your story should confront this misbelief. And oftentimes, skipping down to, like, the need of what a hero, like, what they actually need, not just what they want, is rooted, it's like opposite of this misbelief, where they have to overcome that misbelief to get what they actually need.
Yeah.
But all of that being said, all of the things we've talked about so far drive the B part of your story. So we've kind of already touched on this in previous episodes, but the A part of your story is the external things that are happening to your character. It's all those different flaw events. The B part of the story is the internal journey that your character has. So it is their emotional wound, it's their flaws and how they're overcoming them. It's also usually centered on a goal. Well, the A story is centered on a goal.
Yeah, this is all from Save the Cat.
Yeah, this is starting in Save the Cat kind of stuff. But if you're looking at Story Genius, I believe she still refers to this as well, and more like their wants and their desires.
Yeah.
So it's a goal that they have. That's a story, right? So it might just be to get from point A to point B. Hunger Games, it's to win the games, right? It's just the external problems. But that then transitions over to their need, because they need both. They need a want, which is A story, and a need, which is the B part of your story. Something that they don't realize they need. It's the truth they need to learn. It's usually manifesting your theme. But it also then corresponds to them conquering their wound, the shard of glass, whatever you want to call it. Making them confront this thing that they don't want to confront and resolving it. In some instances, they also get to accomplish their goal and they resolve both their need and their want. But other times they might realize that by resolving their need, they didn't actually need to achieve their goal, and they're happy not completing the A story goal that they had at the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. I think they connect really well. They're not supposed to, like Megan said, not necessarily both be solved, but they have to connect in tandem. The want, or their A story goal, will bring out problems that will make them face their need, or their B story goal. So your A story goal needs to put them in situations that make them uncomfortable, that make them have to face this.
So if you have like a selfish character who needs to learn to be selfless, you will probably want to, put him into situations that are going to then make him make tough decisions, or make them make tough decisions to overcome that. So think about if they have other people in their life that they do actually care about, that maybe put them in a dangerous situation, and it's going to make the character act outside of themselves to confront whatever wound and misbelief they have about why they need to be selfish.
Yeah, so let's jump into our example.
Yeah, so we just kind of picked a random name. So our character's name is going to be Alice, and we picked 2 random traits, just the first things that popped into our head. So she is curious and stubborn.
Yes. Yeah, and that's all you have at the beginning is 2 things you know about them. And that's okay. Like, that is exactly where you should begin. Because as long as you know where they are, you can start. So, I want to give a plug-in to the Emotional Wound Thesaurus, which is what we're going to be using. It's by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi.
We'll list this on our website as well if you want to, under resources, so you can find it.
Yeah, it's basically what it is it's kind of just, it's a thesaurus of wounds, of
psychological trauma.
Yeah, of horrible things that could happen to your character. And it lists out different fears and false beliefs and results, things that can happen because of those. So even if you have an idea of what your character's wound is, or if you're not sure, you can go through this and just kind of get your brain rolling. At least that's what I use it for.
Okay, so we had our sound guy pick a random page, so we're on page 306, and the wound is watching someone die.
Which ironically is the one I've used the most.
Yeah.
So, the results, so that would be what their wound is. So let's say they watched their best friend die, which is
traumatizing,
pretty horrible. But that's what you want to do. You want to have horrible things happen to your character. So as a result of that, let's say our character, it says your character may feel dying and abandoning those in their care, abandonment through death, becoming too emotionally connected to people.
These are things they might fear, just to clarify.
Yeah. Being responsible for others, failing someone when they desperately need help. So, what would you pick?
Maybe, let's say failing someone when they desperately need help. Maybe they were with their friend at, like, playing by the edge of a cliff. I don't know why you do that, because it's a stupid thing to do. And their friend fell off the cliff, and that's how they died.
Wow.
But maybe, you got, like, a Scar Mufasa kind of thing going on.
Yeah, there you go.
Not saying that Alice pushed her friend, no. But maybe she saw her friend begging for help, and she wasn't able to get there in time.
Yeah. So that festers, right? Just think about Alice having to ponder over that as she grows up.
And so she thinks she failed. So she has this festering fear that she's going to fail anyone in desperate need of help.
Yeah.
Because she did.
So that will become her misbelief, is that she can't help people, that she will always fail them. So if we were to jump into a novel with her, her need would need to be to overcome that.
To help people.
To help people, to be able to believe that she can actually save someone.
So it also might kind of manifest in a need of, like, love and belonging, because maybe because she thinks she can't help people, she pushes them away. So the Emotional Wound Thesaurus is amazing, right? Because it will even give you personality traits and kind of emotional triggers and shielding things that people might actually go through if they experienced these traumatic things. So one that it lists for this example would be distancing oneself from friends and family. So maybe she just doesn't think that she's worthy of having family now too. That's another misbelief. So your character can't have multiple.
Yeah. And so if you were building a story, you would want to build an event, or their want at the beginning of their story, that would make them confront those obstacles. So maybe there's somebody that they need to save, and Alice is the only person that can save him, but she is afraid she won't be able to, and so she goes on this journey of having to overcome that fear.
I feel like you see this one a lot, not necessarily starting from watching someone die in rom-coms. That's a really easy way to boil it down to, like, a want and a fear, right? Like, you usually have the city go-getter who wants to do super well at their job and just was wounded by like a breakup or something. So they have this belief that like no one can be trusted and I can't be loved and love will stand in the way of my career goals. And then they go to a small town and they're confronted with all these things and confronted with people that make them realize that getting close to others and love doesn't necessarily conflict with other goals, and that might not actually be what's most important in life. It's a very simple plot, and there's a reason I feel like
it's used.
It's used so often though, because it is relatable and it just boils down this principle really well.
Really down to the basics. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what you would want to do. And how you would kind of build that. So just think about where your character is going to start and what kind of things you can just throw in their way that will cause them to have to face their misbelief. Then just build.
Yeah. So Amy, how many characters should you do this process for?
I would say a lot of your characters, at least your very main characters. So I have 2 protagonists. Well, I have a main protagonist and then
It's a dual POV.
Yeah, dual POV. So I'm doing it for my 2 main characters and then for my villain too. I think it's very important that you do it for your villain because your villain's goal and the internal drive that they have is going to be the opposite of your protagonist.
Yes, and we will talk more about this in next week's episode with one of our guest speakers.
Yeah.
As well as on a bonus episode.
Yeah, villains are awesome.
But yeah, I would agree. I think I wouldn't say you can do this for too many characters. If you start doing this for so many side characters, though, that you are procrastinating writing, you should probably take it a step back. Mm-hmm. But for instance, like you have the dual POV. I've kind of got a multi POV work in progress as well because it's a high story. There's a team, right? So I've done it for at least the main 3 members of the team, so I can kind of understand their dynamics and what would push their team as well as the main protagonist a little more. I definitely say pick at least one of your characters to go super in depth with this and a couple others on the side just to help understand how to drive your story forward, and absolutely do this for your villain because I feel like too often we have shallow villains or a story just misses the mark because we don't have this, because villains have wounds and things too. That's usually why they
do the things they do, why they're evil.
But we'll get way into that later.
I do want to say something too. I think the most important part of this process is making sure they flow together. That your wound causes your fear, and that your fear causes your misbelief, and that builds on your need and comes from your want. I think the whole point of story is being able to relate to our characters, and we can feel and understand if these blend together. If they don't, you can tell.
Yeah, you don't like. That's why I like Emotional Wound Thesaurus or just studying people and studying stories can help a lot with character creation process, because if their fear is that people around them are going to die, it's not like, I don't know, there's like just natural cause and effect things for people and how they react, and you don't want your misbelief in your need and their fear to be so out of left field and out of sync with each other, because it's also just going to cause so many plot holes for you later on. Once you can really get these to flow together, you'll find that the plot really does write itself, and it's easier to pick those plot points.
Yeah, because you see them come together. Yeah, and I for that specifically, I recommend Story Genius. She really digs into how making your plot come from your character. She really pulls from that.
Because the best stories are character driven.
Yes.
And that is just a fact. Yes. Okay, well, Amy, what is our challenge for this week?
Our challenge for you is to take your main protagonist and one other character and figure out their wound, fear, misbelief, and goal, and then need. So go through your characters and dive into this process. And if you want to see this written out, we did post this on our Instagram and Facebook page, so go check those out. And If you have questions or thoughts or you go through this process, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, and thanks so much for listening. Because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
Have a good week.